The crossing did not change the world all at once. It changed what the world remembered. Above the temple, the capital awoke beneath a sky no one could fully explain. The constellations remained where they had always been, yet every astronomer insisted something had changed. Not their position, their meaning. Across the kingdom, the dreams continued, no longer as fragments, no longer as symbols. People began remembering faces, not strangers, not gods, people. A woman whose laughter carried across a shoreline beneath black stars. A child racing between 12 white pillars. An old traveler embraced by those waiting beyond a gate of light. Every dream ended the same way, with a face no one could quite remember, and yet everyone awoke believing they had once loved him. Far below the temple, Elira remained beside the crossing. Neither she nor Vaelor had moved for what felt like hours. The silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt familiar. Finally, she spoke. Who were they? Vaelor did not answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed upon the light beyond the crossing, as though every answer deserved patience. Then, very quietly, they were never meant to become legends. They were simply people. Elira waited. She had expected another mystery, another prophecy. Instead, Vaelor smiled, a real smile, small, almost forgotten. There was a time, he said, when no one feared the crossing. She looked at him. It was never a prison. It was a road. The words felt impossible. Above them, throughout the kingdom, another quiet pulse moved beneath the marble streets. Children paused only long enough to smile. The birds changed direction once more. The rivers shimmered softly beneath the morning sun. Nothing resisted the pulse anymore. Everything welcomed it. Far below, the marble beneath Vaelor's feet answered his presence. Not with light, with memory. Soft reflections spread across the completed circle. Not visions, remembrances. Elira watched a city unlike anything she had ever imagined. No walls, no fortress, no towers built to defend against an unseen enemy. Only gardens, open bridges, white stone, and people. Thousands of ordinary people, living without fear. The memories flowed quietly beneath the marble. Children chased one another between enormous white trees. Merchants laughed beside crystal canals. Musicians filled open squares with songs no one in the kingdom had heard for centuries. There were no ritual chambers, no guardians, no forbidden doors. The crossing stood openly at the heart of the city. Not hidden, celebrated. Families gathered around it as they might gather around a harbor. Some arrived, others departed. No one wept, because no one believed they were saying goodbye forever. Elira watched in silence. This, she whispered, was before the seal. Vaelor nodded. Long before. The world was smaller then. She frowned. It looks endless. He smiled again. No. Our fear made it smaller. The memory continued. For the first time, Elira saw the 12 pillars as they had once been. Bright, whole, standing beneath an open sky, not surrounding a prison, welcoming every traveler who chose to cross. 12 figures slowly approached the crossing. Not kings, not priests, not rulers. Travelers. Each wore the same white mantle. Each bore the same unbroken circle upon their shoulder. No one stood before the others. No one commanded. They walked as equals. Around them, families embraced them. Children laughed. Old friends exchanged promises to meet again. No ceremony marked their departure, because departure itself had never been feared. Elira watched every face carefully. One of them felt strangely familiar, not because she recognized him, because she recognized his kindness. He spoke with children before speaking with scholars. He stopped to help an old traveler lift a heavy satchel. He laughed easily, without hesitation, without burden. Nothing about him resembled the being history had named the God of Ruin. Elira looked slowly toward Vaelor. "You knew him?" Vaelor never looked away from the memory. "Better than anyone." She continued watching. The young traveler smiled once more, and for a heartbeat, Vaelor smiled exactly the same way. The memory lingered, not upon the crossing, upon the young traveler. Elira could not look away. There was nothing extraordinary about him. No crown, no weapon, no mark of power, only kindness. He stopped whenever someone called his name. He listened before he answered. He smiled more often than he spoke. "This," Elira whispered, "is not the man they feared." No. Vaelor's voice was almost lost beneath the quiet pulse of the completed circle. "It never was." The young traveler walked slowly among the gathered families. A little girl ran toward him. She wrapped her arms around him without hesitation. He lifted her into his arms. She laughed. He laughed with her. Nearby, an old woman adjusted the collar of his white mantle as though she had done so 100 times before. A young scholar hurried after him carrying a stack of scrolls. He accepted them with a grateful smile, then returned half of them. "You always carry too much," he told him. The scholar laughed. "So do you." Elira watched every small gesture, every smile, every quiet conversation. Nothing resembled the stories. Nothing resembled the monster. She looked toward Vaelor. "I've never seen you like this." He remained silent, not because he wished to hide the memory, because he had almost forgotten it himself. "The crossing," he said quietly, "did not change who we were. It revealed who we already had become." The memory drifted onward. The young traveler stopped before one of the 12 white pillars. He rested his hand upon the stone, not as someone performing a ritual, as someone greeting an old friend. For a brief moment, he closed his eyes and smiled, the same quiet smile Vaelor still wore. The memory continued. No great event unfolded, no miracle, no prophecy, only ordinary moments. The young traveler sat among children beneath the white trees. He listened as they argued over stories. He laughed when they insisted their versions were better. One little boy climbed onto the stone beside him. "Will you really cross tomorrow?" The young man smiled. "If the crossing allows it." The child frowned. "It always allows you." A warm laugh spread among the adults nearby. The young traveler simply shook his head. "No. The crossing belongs to no one. It only welcomes those who are ready." Elira watched him in silence. Every word sounded familiar, not because she had heard it before, because she had heard someone else speak exactly the same way. She slowly turned toward Vaelor. "You?" He met her eyes. "Yes. You've never changed." For the first time, something fragile crossed Vaelor's expression. Not sadness, not joy. Recognition. Everyone believes centuries change a person. He looked back toward the memory. They do, but not always in the way people imagine. His eyes rested upon the younger man, laughing beneath the trees. The crossing did not take that man away. It carried every part of him with it. Elira looked once more at the memory. There was still no warrior, no conqueror, no god. Only someone who listened more than he spoke. Someone who greeted strangers as friends. Someone who looked upon the world with quiet wonder. The stories were wrong. Vaelor lowered his eyes. No, they were incomplete. The completed circle released another gentle pulse. For a brief heartbeat, the younger traveler lifted his head, as though, across centuries, he had felt someone remembering him. The memory drifted onward. Morning slowly gave way to evening. The city did not grow quieter. It grew warmer. The crossing stood open beneath the fading light. People continued arriving. People continued leaving. Every farewell carried the same promise. We'll meet again. Not hope. Certainty. Elira watched the young traveler move through the crowd. No herald announced his arrival. No guards walked beside him. Yet wherever he passed, people smiled. Children ran toward him before they ran toward their own parents. Old craftsmen greeted him by name. Merchants insisted he take bread for the journey. He thanked every one of them. He remembered every face. He wasn't their ruler, Elira whispered. Vaelor shook his head. No. Their priest? No. Their greatest scholar? A faint smile crossed his face. There were many wiser than I. She looked at him with quiet confusion. Then why does everyone seem to know him? Vaelor remained silent for a long moment. Finally, he answered, because I stayed. The words settled softly between them. Not as an explanation, as a mystery. Before Elira could ask another question, someone entered the memory. A young woman. She crossed the square without haste. The crowd greeted her with the same warmth. Not because she held authority, because her presence carried peace. The young traveler looked up. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. They smiled. Not as strangers. Not as lovers. As two souls who had crossed many roads together. Althira, Elira whispered. Vaelor nodded gently. Yes. She joined him beneath the nearest pillar. For a while, they simply watched the people, the children, the travelers, the families saying farewell. Finally, Althira spoke. They're afraid. The young traveler smiled softly. They always are. But they still choose to cross. Because hope has always been stronger than fear. Althira looked toward the open gate. And if one day, fear becomes stronger, he followed her gaze, then answered with complete certainty. Then someone will have to remind them? The memory faded slowly, but those final words remained, not like prophecy, like a promise. The memory dissolved, the gardens disappeared, the white pillars faded, the voices became echoes, until only the completed circle remained beneath the temple. Elira stood motionless. She no longer saw the being history had called the god of ruin. She saw only the traveler, the man who had laughed with children, the man who remembered every face, the man who believed every journey deserved a welcome. Slowly, she turned toward Vaelor. For a long moment, she searched his face, not for the legend, for the man. Finally, she asked the question that had waited between them since the crossing began. Who was he? Vaelor closed his eyes. The pulse beneath the chamber continued, slow, steady, like the heartbeat of a world remembering itself. When he finally spoke, his voice carried neither pride nor sorrow, only home. Before history gave me another name, before fear turned memory into warning, before the crossing became a prison, I was simply one of the 12. He opened his eyes. Then, for the first time in centuries, he spoke the name no one living had ever heard. My name was Aeren. The completed circle answered, not with light, with recognition. A single pulse traveled outward beneath the kingdom, across the marble streets, across the rivers, across forgotten ruins. Far above, every bell in the capital rang once, not as an alarm, not in celebration, as remembrance. The high priest slowly lifted his head. The king stopped where he stood. Children throughout the city looked toward the temple without knowing why. Somewhere beyond every known horizon, one distant light answered. Then another. Then another. Elira whispered the name once. Aeren. It no longer sounded unfamiliar. It sounded like something the world had always known and had finally remembered.